This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to The Commercial Investing Show, where we analyze, explain, and exploit the opportunities presented in today's commercial property marketplace. If you're interested in apartments, mobile home parks, self-storage facilities, and other income property, you've come to the right place. We'll explore what's hot and what's not in markets nationwide in the relentless pursuit of return on investment. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
Welcome to the show. This is Jason Hartman, your host, and every 10th episode we do something kind of special, kind of different. What we do is we go off topic. So regardless of which show it is on the Hartman Media Network, whether it be one of the financial shows, economics, real estate investing, travel, longevity, all of the other topics that we have, every 10th episode we go off topic and we explore something of general interest, something of general life success value. And so many of our listeners around the world in 164 countries have absolutely loved our 10th episode shows. So that's what we're going to do today. And let's go ahead and get to our guest with a special 10th episode show. And of course, on the next episode, we'll be back to our regular programming. Here we go. It's my pleasure to welcome Michael Daugherty. He is the CEO of the Cyber Education Foundation and founder of the Justice Society. He's author of The Devil Inside the Beltway, the shocking expose of the U.S. government's surveillance and overreach into cybersecurity, medicine, and small business. Michael, welcome. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Thanks. Good to have you. Thanks for joining us. So you do a lot of things, and you had a tremendous, harrowing time fighting the federal government for several years, and your book talking about how they've just massively overreached. And it's amazing to me how people really need to be concerned about government abuse of power. And, the government's got unlimited resources, unlimited budgets, and none of us have that. And prosecutors and people with regulatory agencies out to collect fines, they're just looking to grow their resume, right? And that is very unfair many times, isn't it?
Well, true. And the infrastructure to do this started in 1914 when Woodrow Wilson really started the first bureaucracy. But it slowly grew like a innocent little lamb into a big beast. But it was weaponized by the Obama administration, where all the insiders, and many of them are still embedded in government, think they're right, read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, understand the concept of power. Now, this has gone on in the FBI for years. I mean, these tactics of intimidation and wearing you down, it's a very, very brief playbook. It's just, here's what's going to be presented about you. You can just cooperate now, please. Or we will take you through the process, and the process will break you financially, ruin your reputation, and even if you win in the end, you'll be, beat to a pulp. So which would you like? That is an old playbook. However, the use of the playbook is very, very, very prevalent now. We saw it with Mike Flynn only because he's so well known, but it happens all the time. And it happened with my company as well. So what we don't have is enough stories about it because people, I think most Americans go, well, it's the IRS, that I'm afraid of, and they'll come at me. And so if you're in trouble with the IRS, I don't want them to see me as your friend, so I'll just hide over here. But it's more than the Internal Revenue Service now, folks. It's all over the place. It's all the agencies. It's the playbook of getting you to submit.
This is the problem. There are so many obscure laws nowadays that ignorance of the law really should be an excuse. It shouldn't be an excuse when the laws are simple and easy to understand. But now we've moved so far beyond that, it's absolutely mind-boggling. When you refer to 1914 and Woodrow Wilson and the first bureaucracy, to which bureaucracy are you referring?
Well, Woodrow Wilson was an academic guy, and they're always dangerous because they think they know everything with no real world experience. And he had this great intention of, you know what, we're having the medical revolution, the industrial revolution, and these politicians shouldn't regulate it because they're politicians. So we have to have these bureaucracies. And what he forgot was that the founding fathers didn't believe anyone with power could be trusted. and Woodrow Wilson thought the government with power could be trusted. So getting experts to regulate an industry is fine. And that's what the agencies were supposed to be. They were supposed to be experts that had drilled down specific knowledge in an area. But the problem was that he gave them unbelievable power. And that really morphed over the next 20, 30 years. Federal FDR sent it over the edge. But they have their own courts. They make their own rules. You have to go through their own procedures first before you can get to an Article 3 court. So essentially, the agencies can do whatever the heck they want to you, and you can't get anyone to help you on the other side until they're done with you. And they're done. That part of they're done with you is really a torture chamber of investigation. And that's what Woodrow Wilson started.
Yeah, okay. So super briefly here, because there's a lot of other stuff I want to talk about. Your story is that you had a medical lab business and you got hacked. And so cybersecurity is a big deal nowadays. You know, I've hired cyber investigators in my business before, and competitors will do all kinds of things to try and mess up your technology. And, it's a constant thing. Or just hackers that want to make a name for themselves on the internet, these obscure, weird people. And basically, it was an extortion, almost like a not ransomware concept, a little different, but tell us about that real briefly, if you would.
Okay, so this is in 2008. My medical laboratory had 700,000 patients. We got a call from a guy, and he said, "We've got your file, and it's out in cyberspace, and we do remediation. Would you like to pay us? Would you like to hire us?" And I said, "What's your IP address? How did you find it?" And he wouldn't tell me unless I paid him. Well, we didn't believe anything he said. We thought that was extortion. We wouldn't pay him. He was very upset about that, and he turned us over to the government. The government started investigating us, not him, in 2010, and that went on to courts. We didn't get a final order to the end of the decade. December 23rd, 2019, we actually were awarded almost $1 million for a $16 million battle. And it's because we learned that this guy didn't find it in cyberspace, that he was working with the FBI. He was given FBI weapons to use for investigations that were legit. And outside the legit investigations, he was building an intimidation racket, breaking into companies, stealing files, altering the metadata, lying to companies. And a lot of corporations just write a check because everyone's covering their own tail.
Sure, it's the same kind of companies that wrote checks to, for many, many millions of dollars years ago to Jesse Jackson when he would shake them down, accusing them of racism. And it's basically the way the government, and Jesse Jackson wasn't a government actor in that sense. He was just a shakedown artist. But the way the government gets around things is they get a private party or a private company to be a proxy for their end goal. And now we see it with big tech. We see that, of course, everybody has the right to free speech protected by the First Amendment. But what they do is now they're using these giant tech companies as proxies for their agenda. And I'm sure you'll want to get into that because basically the tech companies can just say, well, you don't have the right to free speech on our platform, which is a very legitimate idea. But they've become so large, they have GDPs bigger than many countries. So there's not an alternative now. There's not an alternative platform anymore, which is the problem among many nowadays. So the government used they had the proxy of this person basically hacking, and then they used that hacking information for their own benefit.
Right. And they admit it. The Justice Department has told friends of mine who doesn't know they're speaking to friends of mine that they get a lot of leads from these criminals. So they turn the other cheek a lot of times. But what's worse in my instance is that they're not going to indict because what are they going to do? A defense lawyer is going to, if they indict the guys, the defense lawyer is going to go, well, wait a minute, Your Honor, the prosecutor was the co-conspirator. So when you have the FBI and the Justice Department that won't indict, because they're making stuff up and they have all sorts of power to bury it. They can bury everything. And we're learning how unbelievably corrupt, which is not a surprise. the founding fathers knew, and we have forgotten, that it's not about government. It's about anything that gets huge power goes corrupt.
Yeah. No, of course. And I'm not just blaming government. It's just big.
No. That's the topic right
absolutely.
now. But I'm not saying you shouldn't blame government, because government is the worst, because they have such power. They can hide in the woodwork. They're parasites. Now, and there's blood on everyone's hands, because when you go to DC, I mean, here I was a healthcare entrepreneur, and I never really worked, quote unquote, DC before. And the number one shock of DC was that all these people know this. And they're fine with it. I mean, it's laughable. I mean, they'll laugh at you if you don't know that, because, another naive outside the Beltway guy. I mean, it's more of a fear culture, a survival culture. It's not like they have meetings of corruption. It's that everyone knows to keep their eyes to the ground, mind their own damn business. And you don't blow the whistle on anybody, because you never know. Your enemy today will be your friend tomorrow. And, in 15 years, you might be needing them. So everyone just looks the other way. When I was looking for a lawyer in D.C. to take on the government, I found lawyer after lawyer after lawyer that just laughed and said, forget justice. This is administrative law. You're dead.
Yeah.
You're not allowed.
Basically, instead of being the typical, I mean, I don't have much to do with this, but I just hear stories from the outside, and I interviewed many people on this. Administrative law instead of civil law, they have like this star chamber judicial process instead of this sort of open, transparent court system where anybody gets to go sit in the back and write a story about it. This is all like a FISA court, right?
Right.
It operates.
And it use all the sneaky legal words, and the judges look the other way. And I mean, it's all predicated on this false foundation of, well, we're the government, we're trustworthy. And it's our job to protect everyone else. So you don't get discovery in your disputes. It's a civil matter. It's about, a cease and desist order. It sounds like these little tiny hand slaps. So what's the big deal? But because of the internet, they have got massive power to ruin your reputation, because the American public has no attention span whatsoever. So they read headlines. That's it. And the Washington Post and the New York Times play that like a fiddle, and they use the words beautifully. They'll stick allegedly in there. And then, half people don't know what the word allegedly is, and they'll believe you did it and you're dead. And that was the biggest power they have over everybody. And so when you go approach multi-million, like Facebook, $5 billion, ooh, drop in the bucket. Google gets fined $325 million. That was like 3.5 minutes of revenue.
It's not just that, though. Wait a second. Here's the thing about those fines. When big, giant companies pay a fine, it doesn't hurt the perpetrator very much, if at all. The shareholders are the one paying the fine. The public pays the fine. Mark Zuckerberg isn't paying the fine. Maybe he's sharing a little bit in it. Anybody could argue. But because of the way companies are set up and the way public markets are structured, that burden falls to all the middle-class shareholders, is who.
Well, and that bounces back. They just churn the money and they scrape it off, and then it's forgotten in a matter of months. Forgotten. And then the agency goes, breaks its arm, patting itself on the back, going on some sort of congratulation tour. And the people in the audience of their self-congratulation tour is big law, agencies, politicians, and media. All these people are in the business. If they didn't have a crisis, they wouldn't have a living. So they go from agency to big law to big tech. I mean, the commissioner that recused herself from my case, Julie Brill, she left the agency. She comes out of, Vermont, land of the liberal government that's a small town that probably can work as a small town, to a DC commissioner who is way in over her head. Then she goes to big law, and then now she's a VP at Microsoft. What a surprise. And she's in a culture, and she's just an example of self-congratulation. I mean, it's really insidious. And her audiences are everyone that's making money off this, all the privacy people. I mean, there's a whole industry of people that protect us, quote unquote, that are insanely incompetent and completely unaccountable and make a really good living.
Yeah, it's really something. A lot of things need to change. Well, tell us in Chapter 6 of your book, you talk about Section 5 of the FTC Act, the trap that Congress laid. What is that?
Well, Congress, when they started the administrative state, congressmen love the administrative state. I don't care what party they're in. And the reason is because Congress doesn't have to do anything dirty. They can be the good guy or they can ignore you, and all the agencies do the bad stuff. And the Democrats go, oh, we need them to save the world, and nothing happens. And they don't have to do anything. And they approved this law that said the Federal Trade Commission has Section 5 to protect consumers from unfairness and deception. Now, deception's kind of easy to prove, but unfairness is like ugliness. It's in the eye of the beholder. And there's no definition for what is unfair. So, and Congress never acts on anything. So the FTC appoints itself to what they think is unfair. And they decided that cybersecurity done the wrong way was unfair. But they never say what is fair. And their investigation powers are so crazy that I was the first person to take them on this. Because you have to be crazy enough to walk through courts and spend millions over years over a stupid little question. So if you don't get to a judge, they can do what they want. And Congress isn't going to change a thing because Congress loves agencies because it keeps them just, saying my hands are tied. I don't have the power. Please send me a check. My hands are tied. I don't have the power. Please send me a check. And they just raise money and have a great life and jet around and blame the other side. And it's just, and it's built to be a mess anyway. So they created this beast. Now, did they know it was such a beast 100 years ago? No. But this is what happens, right? And everyone that created this beast is dead and can't see. FDR would be mortified. I got to think he'd be mortified. I mean, he was afraid of it when it was going on. He knew. But, it moves so slowly, but the technological age is expanded. And then the Obama presidency really created a playbook of how to put these corrupt people in and they're warriors. These people are absolutely brutal warriors. They're playing just like these Antifa people are. You're sitting here vulnerable and stunned, and they're out there intentionally breaking the rules because to them it's war, and that means all's fair.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's switch gears now and talk about, what's going on in the world. You have some thoughts about, Twitter removing President Trump's video tribute to George Floyd. What's their rationale for that one? I mean, this is unbelievable. We have these non-government censors, and they censor what they want, and they don't censor what they don't want, and they fight subpoenas, and they're absolutely disgusting, these big tech companies. I mean, they are just appalling at their abuse.
They're like the movie The Alien, how it was tiny in the first 10 minutes and it's full grown in like an hour. And the tech companies grew from nothing to massive so fast that they can afford anything. And really, Microsoft getting in trouble with the government scared all tech ahead of time. And these people they're lawyered up and they're ready for battle.
Oh, not only that, they have armies of lobbyists. I mean, it's just unbelievable how their influence over the government is insane. I mean, listen, I don't love everything about Elizabeth Warren by any stretch, but I do like the way she wants to hold Wall Street and big tech accountable. I got to tell you, I really do agree with her on that stuff.
Yeah, but I think everyone that was honest would want to hold them accountable. It's the how. It's utterly impossible unless we have some massive change. It's probably got to be through antitrust. But what I want to say is, here's what they're doing, and here's what she's not saying. What she's saying about today, this is nothing less than book burning. They are book burning. It's just technology has changed the books. And this is all they're doing. And people better wake up.
It's just like the socialist Nazis that burned the books. This is Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 all over again,
That's right.
Yeah, it's the thought police. They're just everywhere, and it is unbelievable that they can get away with it. It's absolutely appalling. What are we going to do? I mean, antitrust, but no administration has had any real appetite to go after antitrust in any significant way for decades. It's like they just don't do it.
Well, that's because, again, look, this country is on a precipice bigger than it was in 2016, which I can't believe I'm saying. And that's because when Trump won, he was basically, and I don't think Trump understood what he was getting into. I really don't, because you have to see it to believe it truly in your gut. And I've seen the beast and I've danced with the beast, or I would not have this opinion so clearly. But his hand went on that mask and he started to rip it off because they came at him first. And there are a lot of powers against the populace of this country, a lot. And we're in shock. We're watching what the media has just done with COVID. I mean, they're lying left and right, about treatments and medical treatments, and they spin. Let me give you an example, because I've been in medicine for 30 years. This hydroxychloroquine thing. When I see the New York Times try to beat up, or the Washington Post beat up Trump because they gaslight everyone, that he said hydroxychloroquine would be a cure. No one has said hydroxychloroquine is a cure. It's a pill that helps because it can be very much anti-inflammatory at a very early stage. But and the point isn't the detail. The point is they don't care if they're messing with a successful disease treatment. This is about power. And Trump is like the one little guy in front of a Chinese tank. People don't understand how big the Chinese tank is. They're seeing it now with their own eyes, with the riots, the media hiding the riots, what's going on with what the Democratic machine did to Bernie Sanders twice. I can't believe people on the left are so out of touch, because the truth is it's not left versus right. It's insider with power versus outsiders with bags over their heads. And Trump is the massive threat because he's pulling bags off of heads. And we don't have a lot of time to wake up. So when you see book burning cloaked as we want to educate you on race, it's very, very dangerous. I mean, if you play the race card a million times to get power, you're just hurting the race you're allegedly protecting.
Yeah, I know. But that's what the left has done for decades. I mean, everything they do hurts the people they say they're trying to help.
He's being burned and police being told to go away. I mean, this is beyond comprehension. Beyond comprehension. I mean, coming from a law enforcement family, to see a mayor ignore and let them run and go and destroy things. Look what's going on in Seattle and Los Angeles. It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, it really is. It's unbelievable. But the one thing that is for sure is that businesses will never, in any significant way, come back to those neighborhoods. And that will be the thing. That's the one thing the government can't do. They can't force a business to open there. Yes, they'll incentivize it through opportunity zones, et cetera. And, that's a whole nother scam we could talk about another day, but long before the riots and COVID, obviously. All of these areas will just become more and more impoverished. It'll just get worse and worse. They'll become more dependent on government. It's absolutely shocking.
Well, I come from Detroit, and what we have now that we didn't have back then is we have history. Back then, it was like, Obama running on no record. There was no record. There's a record of devastation of what happens. After Baltimore with Ferguson and how that all blew out versus Detroit, they're going to annihilate it, and it won't come back. You can burn a house down in 3 seconds. You can't build it back as quick.
Yeah. Well, so what does that mean? Can you just elaborate on that before we wrap it up? What do you mean? We understand you can destroy things faster than you can build it. But before that, you were making the Detroit, Ferguson, et cetera.
Well, Detroit, I grew up in Detroit. I was a kid during the riots. Detroit was, what people don't know is Detroit one day was bigger than Chicago. It was a number one city.
It was one of the flagship cities of the world.
Unbelievable education. I had phenomenal education when I was a kid. And then when the riots happened, we moved out to the middle of nowhere, and I was a year ahead of everybody. And people don't know that. Now you say Detroit, kids that were born from 1970 and later in the Detroit area don't know how to get around Detroit because they're not allowed to go. And so people, and that's there. That is an example that wasn't there in the 60s when they torched Detroit. It's a massive cut your nose off to spite your face. If we don't learn we only learn from history if we want to. Fully democratic, ton of corruption along the way. One of the mayors is in jail still. This is incredible. He might be on probation now, but the nonstop fleecing and corruption of the Black community by Black leadership in the Black community, the exploitation is because this is a human condition, not a racial condition. Whenever you hand over, everyone else flees. This is why you see the small Black business owner yelling at people when the Blacks are destroying their business. I mean, they know. They've lived through it. They know that they're so vulnerable, so nothing breaks their heart more when their own race destroys themselves. And this is cutting their nose off to spite the face.
Yeah, it's a
terrible,
sad story. It really is. The thing we've got to all realize is that everybody's got an agenda. Sometimes the agenda syncs with a good outcome. Mostly it doesn't. And, there are people like Al Sharpton, for example, who are just, they're just profiting from other people's misery, basically.
He's sight beyond comprehension. But what's terrifying is the people that give him platform. That's the scary part. I mean, the number of people that give that corrupt man platform, that just shows the desperation for true leadership within the Black community. It's terrifying. It's really sad.
It seems as though one of the first issues that would seem sort of obvious. I don't know. Maybe this is nutty that I think this, but it seems like we should stop counting the races. Like, why are we, if the government's supposed to be colorblind, why does it count everybody? And, we talk about this group and that group. Let's stop talking about it and just be people. It's the brotherhood of man. I mean,
it works. No, divide and conquer works. Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, Obama, they're masters. They're masters. It works. They know the public has no memory. The masses of people will be cowards. The masses of people will believe it. The masses of people don't feel educated enough or know what to do. So they cower. Fear works. Doubt works. Dividing them works. Making you dependent works. And it's coming to a head right now because it's completely out of control. I mean, it's so off the rails, even they can't say defund the police. But this works for them. I mean, Nancy Pelosi shows up with whatever garb around her neck. I mean, as long as those people keep voting for those people, you reap what you sow.
Yeah, I know. But, the question is, when will it change? I mean, downtown Seattle might be the new Detroit or much worse.
And look at how many of those idiots are entitled white kids.
Oh, of course they are. I mean, the whole government-free zone that they have, the new country they've set up, will collapse as soon as they realize they can't get their lattes. They don't know where to charge their iPhones. They can't get a good vegetarian meal, or vegan meal.
Handing everyone weapons, but will be for another segment.
It's absurd. Yeah, it really is. Give out your website.
TheDevilInsideTheBeltway.com is easier to remember than my name.
All right, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
It was great talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.